Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of MLL Roundtable. Here with me, your host, Andrew Goldberg, along with Brendan Stout. You can follow us on Twitter at MLL Roundtable, at Goldieberg, and at BStout631, as well as liking us on Facebook at MLL Roundtable. And you can also Skype us at Andrew.Goldberg12 and Brandon Stout, all one name for Brendan. And this is our first broadcast after the holidays. Brendan, how was your holiday?
It was good until my plane from Dallas back to Philly decided to lose their pressurization system, so I had to wait another half hour. But other than that, pretty good, my man.
So how long was that wait? What is that even like?
It's usually a couple hours, to tell you the truth. You know, they got to go find another plane and whatnot, but we got lucky, and half hour later we had another plane, so it wasn't that much of a delay.
Yeah, and I saw you were in Kansas.
Yeah, man, I was spreading the game.
Is that what you were doing, or did you have family out there?
No, I had family.
Oh, you had. I don't know. You could be doing both. I'm not gonna call BS on you.
No, absolutely. I wish I was.
And also, you said, I remember seeing your tweets. I don't know why you're watching hockey. I'm not personally a fan of hockey, and not many people watch it anyway. But I saw that the Philadelphia Flyers game was on.
Yeah, man. As soon as we showed up to the Outback out there, had the Flyers game on. They ended up winning. I think it was like 5-3 or something like that. So it was a pretty nice welcome package. Nice juicy
Well,
steak, and the Flyers win. That's the way to do it.
all the way out in Kansas, man. Anyway, for those of you who missed last week's edition of MLL Roundtable, we started off doing our team previews, looking at back-to-back MLL champions in the Chesapeake Bayhawks. So, naturally, we're going to look at the Charlotte Hounds today. And the reason why we let off with the Rocky theme song was not because the Philadelphia Eagles won the NFC East, the NFC East yesterday, to go from first to worst and become the 11th consecutive team to do so, but because they were a great underdog story last year, weren't they, Brendan?
Oh, absolutely. These guys just came out of nowhere. Second year in the league, just pumped it up, man. They just pumped each other up, and that Rocky song got me pumped up for this show.
Yeah, I was feeling it, man. I mean, the video I was playing on YouTube, it didn't really have the, him running up the steps of City Hall with his hands raised or anything. They just had the picture framed and all that. But I'm pretty pumped right now. I can go run a little bit. I mean, it's cold, but I can do it.
I
I can
mean,
get back into preseason form.
hey, I'd go for a run, but that takes too much effort.
Yeah, it just takes too much effort right now for being employed and stuff. I'm
Absolutely.
gonna go to the gym later, so that's much easier. But anyway, what we did last week was we looked at the 2013. We looked back at the 2013 season. Then we're gonna look at the offseason moves that the Charlotte Hounds made, and then we're gonna look forward to 2014. Try to do a little bit of a forecast and see how everything's gonna kind of gel together for the Hounds in this second year as they try to get back to the MLL championship weekend and even maybe the championship weekend. So looking back at 2013, Brendan, for those of our listeners who don't remember what happened to Charlotte, they snuck into the playoffs. They were an even 7-7 last year and actually got lucky as they backed into the playoffs as they lost the last game of the season to, as you would guess, the Chesapeake Bayhawks. And as I mentioned, they were the fourth seed, going in 7-7. They were 3-3 actually in the beginning, and they ended the season 4-4, obviously, to finish 7-7. And then, as we saw in championship weekend with Rocco Granado and Tim Pierce, was them taking on the Denver Outlaws, who all of us on the panel said that Charlotte would get blown out of the water because Denver would have too much firepower. They had the best defense, defenseman of the year. They had the league MVP. They had the best goalie. And they shocked the world. They were a true Rocky underdog team, and they really actually dominated throughout. Mike Sawyer was incredible. Him and I think Pete Polion both had huge two-pointers to really push the tempo and give the Hounds a big lead early on. I think it was like 8-2 at, I would say, midway through the second before they held on for a victory. I think it was 14-11. And then they played the Bayhawks to a pretty close game until their youth and experience started to show, and the Bayhawks kind of stuck it to them. They got a cheap 2-point goal to really decrease the margin, but for the most part, they hung tough, and the final score is 10-7. I mean, what did you think of last year from the Charlotte Hounds?
These, they had a lot of young talent, as we saw through, the entire season with Josh Hawkins, Mason Poley, Owen Bly. Like a lot, they had a lot of contribution from their rookies, which was really spectacular for the Hounds organization. They gave the 1-2 punch to Denver and made the Denver Outlaws punch their ticket home, which me and Rocco did pick them. I have to correct you on that. Me and Rocco did pick them to beat Denver for some reason. But they had a lot of help when they added on Jeff Snyder towards the end of the season. I mean, that guy just lit it up at the faceoff X for them. He dominated Anthony Kelly and then went on and dominated the Bayhawks faceoff guys. But they like you said, their inexperience and youth showed in the championship game. But you also have to think about they played a heck of a game against the Denver Outlaws the day before, and if that didn't it exhausted me just watching the game, for crying out loud. I mean, those guys they left nothing. They left absolutely everything on that field, absolutely everything. And I honestly would not be surprised to see it come again this year, especially after they had a pretty successful supplemental draft, and with the collegiate draft coming up here in about 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, so let me go back to a point you made about Jeff Schneider and the impact he made at the X for the Hounds last year. Obviously, playing lacrosse, and any of our listeners who have previously played lacrosse, is that face-offs in general can be a very big part of the game. If you score, lacrosse is one of the few sports that allows you the opportunity to get the ball back and go right back on offense. And it's just such a huge key if you have a good face-off man. Somehow that didn't work out in the MLL as much because it can be offset if you don't obviously turn the ball over too much. Because if you hold the ball on offense, obviously you're limiting how much the other team can control the ball. Very obvious point. Last year, Charlotte was actually third worst on face-offs on the season at 46.7%. So even though they did get a big boost with Jeff Snyder, and he did help them during that game, throughout the season they did manage to survive, I guess, without him because of that percentage and the fact that they had veterans like Matt Danowski, Ryan Young, Pete Polyan on offense. I mean, looking at Matt Danowski, he had 49 points last year, which was fourth in the league in total points. He was second among attackmen in total points behind I think it was Drew Seiverts, right? And they also had Ryan Young on attack, like I said, who had 3 points. He was seventh among attackmen in points. And finally, they had Pete Polyan, more on him a little later when we talk about the offseason moves, but he was 18th in the league with 33 points. So they had a really veteran and experienced attack line, which I think was really big for them, especially with so many rookies playing in between the lines, because the attackmen knew that once they made a stop, they had, they could take the air out of the ball, when to press. If they had opportunity in transition, they would take smart shots. Not to mention that, obviously, Matt Danowski is one of the best players in the MLL. Obviously by the numbers, but also by his previous accolades, being a numerous All-American at Duke. He was the career points leader in the NCAA before Rob Pennell broke that this past year. And obviously Ryan Young was instrumental at Maryland in helping them to back-to-back national championship game appearances. So I think that was a real strength for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Matt Danowski and Pete Polyan's leadership, with them being in with them being in the league for so many years, it helps out the younger guys. Ryan Young, he's been in the league for a couple of years, so he definitely has some leadership skills to hand down to young guys. I mean, you got Eric Lusby, who was in his second year last year, Mike Sawyer in his first, Jake Tripucka, who was in his first, Matt White, Mason Poley, Owen Blythe, those, like, a lot of those younger guys just entering their first season in the league, and really adjusting very well to how the game was played. I mean, Josh Hawkins on, short stick D mid, who had a phenomenal career at Loyola. He helped out so much when Charlotte traded for him from Hamilton. I mean, I thought that might have been that was one of the better decisions Charlotte made, and maybe not the best decision that Hamilton had made getting rid of him. But the leadership counts in this league. I talked to Bill McGowan. He's happy to join the Ohio Machine, and he's ready to bring his leadership skills there. I mean, he's been in the league since, I think, 2006 or 2007, and he's been nothing but good for. He's gave his team an extra boost at the midfield, but like I said, leadership definitely helps the younger guys transition well, and we saw that even with Chesapeake with Jesse Earnhardt at the LSM position, youngest kid probably on on that defense, because he got to learn from Brian Spallina and Nicky Polanco, and I think it was Michael Evans, and Kip Turner in between the pipes. He got to learn from the most experienced defenders in the league. So experience definitely helps young guys transition well.
And I think it's not even just the case in lacrosse that you need experience. It's a case in the NFL, and the NBA, and the MLB, really any sport. And obviously every team tries to find the right balance between having, splitting up your team between young guys and veteran guys with experience. And I think Charlotte really found that groove last year, especially towards the end of the season during championship weekend, like we mentioned, with all these rookies as well as some experienced players. We mentioned, like you just said, Matt Danowski, Ryan Young, Pete Poyan, guys were in the league for multiple years, not just like 2 years like a guy like Eric Lusby or Ryan Flanagan's very good defenseman, but Joe Sinoski is another one of those guys like Matt Danowski, who's been in the league for a lot of years, and I think all those guys, they found the perfect complement of experience and youth. They started as many as, I think we counted during championship weekend. I think not started, but they had as many as 10 guys playing huge minutes for them. Mike Sawyer had 20 points last year from the attack spot, but I think they also ran him at midfield towards the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Jake Tripucka was a midfielder, really turned it on at the end of the year, had 11 points. Matt White had 11 points. Mason Poley, a defenseman, a Pole, had 11 points. He was huge for them in the transition game, and he actually shot the ball really well. On the 12 shots he took, he shot 500%, from the field. And then, not to mention, they had Josh Hawkins, a great, athlete in between the lines on short stick defense. John Haas, kind of a similar mold, not as strong as Josh Hawkins, but certainly but more of an offensive threat. Having just graduated from Maryland, he was one of the leaders on their team. And as well as you had Michael McCormick out of Yale, a very good defenseman. He played 7 games for them and played a huge role for them towards the end of the season as well. To go with Ryan Flanagan and Joe Sinoski, very experienced, very good defense. And then you have Adam Gittleman in goal as well. And Gittleman wasn't the best goalie, but he's very athletic. He was a former high school running back, a stud high school running back, and he was 5th in the league last year in goals against average. In terms of save percentage, I think he was at 54. He was actually ranked at the bottom at 49.7%, but he's really turned it on in championship weekend. I thought he played some of his best lacrosse during that weekend. So, I mean, there's just so much youth, and, looking at what they did in the offseason is, I guess, indicative of how confident they are in their youth, because they traded Pete Poyan, who, as I mentioned, was a leader for them, who had 33 points last year, and they actually get Joe Cummings back, who used to play with Ryan Young at Maryland, and the two of them led Maryland to, those back-to-back national title appearances. Brendan, how big of an impact think bringing them together and working them in tandem on the attack line is going to be for the Hounds this year?
Well, it's definitely going to be helpful. It definitely isn't going to hurt. I mean, getting rid of Poyon was maybe not the smartest idea for their midfield because he brought he just fired up team with his ridiculous goals. How he scored half his goals, I have no idea. But they also have the duo of Eric Lusby and Mike Sawyer, who both played at Loyola together. Them together just dismantled Maryland's defense when they played each other in that championship game. With them two, plus Ryan Young and Joe Cummings, Matt Danowski, a lot of Loyola is now Patriot League, but they used to be ECAC. You got a lot of ACC guys on this team now. They just picked up Davey Amala from North Carolina guy who got drafted by the Oilers. They also picked up Davis Butts, another Loyola kid. They're keeping a lot of players together who played well together in college. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this team, go very far again.
Yeah, and I think that's what everybody expects, and I think that's part of the reason why they move Pete Poyan to the Chesapeake Bayhawks is because they knew that they had such a strong core of young players that are coming in. And not to mention, look, this league obviously doesn't have many teams. It only has 8 teams. You're going to get a former first-team All-American, probably with your first 2 picks in the draft when the collegiate draft comes up. So not only do they get to keep the young players that are starting to make the core of this team, as well as great players, great veterans like Danowski, like Ryan Young, like Sinoski, like Flanagan. They're going to be able to add to that talent and add really, really good talent to a team that they already have. And I think what's going to make this season really interesting, not only for Charlotte, but just the whole entire league, is the fact that Denver still has a higher-powered offense, a great defense, and a great goaltender. New York Lizards made a lot of moves in the offseason to do the same exact thing. Really good on offense. Their goaltender's really good, and Drew Adams. Their defense is slightly improved, and I think they could be a playoff team. Can't count Boston out of it because they got Paul Rabel. They have the former MVPs and Paul Rabel and Matt Pasque. They have Will Manny, who's a great attackman. And then Chesapeake has an incredible offense after making huge blockbuster deals throughout the offseason as we previewed last week. So I think this is going to be a really exciting season. Charlotte's also going to play itself into that discussion as well. And I think, like you said, they should definitely be in play to get back to the championship game because they do have younger legs, and they're going to have the ability to add more younger legs during the season. One guy I kind of like as an underdog through all the undercover the supplemental draft moves that they made was Pierce Bassett, who was a really good goalie 2 years ago for Johns Hopkins. He was close to 60% save percentage, I believe, and was a really big part of their success. Last year, not so much. He really took a turn for the worst, I guess you would say. I mean, look, he was still like a good goalie, but he was nowhere close to what he was the year before. And that's not to mention the fact that he had Tucker Durkin still on his defense, who was the only rookie to to be named a All-Pro in the MLL. So I think if Adam Gittleman isn't doing as well as they would like, I think Pierce Bassett is a good alternative to give them, a couple good games of goaltending.
Yeah, I completely agree there. Hopkins didn't have the same team that they had, 2 years ago. But Pierce still stood tall. He's a big goalie, very loud. As if you've watched games on TV, you can hear him yelling. And that's what you need to be as a goalie, as you and I both know, is that you need to be communicative with your defense. You need to be loud. You need to be controlling back there. You see things that your defense doesn't. Adam Gittleman's a very good goalie. The Virginia guy led him to a national championship his senior year. Started as a freshman. But Maryland went and dismantled him there. But Pierce Bassett's is going to be a great backup for Gittleman. I believe Gittleman is still coaching at Harvard. I'm not positive if he's still there or not.
I
But
think he is, as you know, as we went into broadcast. I think he's been. I mean, his profile picture on his Twitter, for whatever that is worth, has him with the Harvard flag. So I would believe that he is still coaching there. For now.
okay, so I mean, if Harvard ends up breaking through in the college game, Pierce Bassett will be a great a good alternative for a starter. They had Mark Manos from Drexel, the big kid, straight out of Westchester East, down the road here from me. He was a split ski. He was quick to ground. Very good goalie. Unfortunately, they didn't protect him and did not redraft him. That might have been due to cover or something like that. But Pierce Bassett's definitely a great alternative if they need a starter in net.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, like you said, Mark Manos was bigger, I feel like, in a different way, kind of towards the beer belly type player. But, I mean, Pierce Bassett is bigger, like you said, in terms of height-wise. He's like 6'1", maybe pushing 6'2", and, he's a pretty stocky guy, and he takes up a lot of the cage. And I think that comes into advantage when you see faster shots and you can't react as much. Maybe it'll just hit your chest protector somewhere, hit your leg somewhere just because you're a bigger guy and you take up, more of the cage. Obviously, the players are better. They're going to shoot, their shooting skills are so refined at the top level that they can, hit literally the top right corner from the left side, running at full speed going across the field. So it's not like he's playing chums, but I think he can get a couple cheap saves, if he just doesn't see the ball well, gets screened, whatever. One last name I'd like to get your opinion on is Jake Smith, defenseman out of UMass. He was drafted as the number 7 overall pick in the supplemental draft. What do you think about him? At least maybe cracking the rotation with McCormick and Sinowski and Flanagan, maybe get some run at pole to spell Poley. No pun intended there, but what do you think about him?
Give me a second.
Yep.
Sorry. I see him possibly getting in there. I mean, he's a 6 foot 190 kid out of UMass. He would take on probably his opponent's best attackman and whatnot. It's gonna be hard for him to crack because their defense was pretty sound last year. With Flanagan and those guys. One thing about Poley, though, is that Poley is now is a volunteer coach down at Richmond. So depending on, how the Spiders fare in their first season in the NCAA D1 level, he may or may not be back for the beginning of the season. So Jake might be able to, sneak on there for a few runs, which I wouldn't be surprised to see.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like I said, the league is not that deep. You're drafting a lot of really good players, and this guy was a USILA honorable mention All-American last year, first team All-New England, first team All-CAA, Scholar American, Scholar All-American, all that stuff. So it's not like they're getting a chump here. I mean, he's a good player, played for a good team. He played with Will Manny, so I mean, it's not like he went up against bad competition in practice either. So I think it's going to be a good move. So as we kind of wrap up the preview here before we go to our New Year's resolutions, which I'm really kind of excited about, we kind of did like a gift segment on NCAA Lax Game Day, which is from Saturdays with me and John Alfonso. Aya Devaya in the morning at 11 a.m. for those of you who like to get a little college game day knowledge in. We did some gifts, so I'm really excited for the resolutions for New Year's since that's coming up in a day or two. But anyway, getting back to the Charlotte Hounds, what do you think is, I guess, their ceiling, their floor, or what should Charlotte Hounds fans expect from this team in 2014?
They're going to expect a lot out of them after making that run last year. and downing the Denver Outlaws to give them their only loss of the year. Putting Denver down to 14-1 and sending them home that next day. Honestly, I wish Kyle was on the show right now. He'd be freaking out about the Charlotte Hounds and whatnot. But they're going to expect a lot out of it. The fans are going to expect a lot out of them. They're going to expect a lot out of themselves. The coaching staff is going to expect a much higher and I'm trying to think of the word, a much more physical team, I'm guessing. Because, as we watched them against Denver, we saw, I think it was Flanagan, who almost literally ripped off Mundorf's head. So that physicality is there. They're just going to expect a little bit more out of them, kind of like Tucker Durkin style, because that kid is physical.
Yeah, and obviously you got Ryan Young, starting fights on the attack line. I think he decked Jesse Schwartzman on a clear attempt towards middle of the fourth quarter or something, and he got the team fired up. They got like offsetting penalties, and I think they get the fire from him and that kind of FU not backing down attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan and Young brought that same mentality to Charlotte from Maryland. When he was at Maryland, he was that guy that scored a goal. He was that kid that just celebrated his mind off. And like you saw the Maryland bench over the past couple of years, they were psyched up also. But it's going to be a little bit of a different team with Poulin out. It's the midfield's going to have to work a lot harder. They're definitely going to. With Davis Butts and Davey Amala coming in, those are two key players that they needed in order to help out the midfield production. The other guy that I'm actually interested in possibly seeing on the field is Mike Gable, the goalie who's been in the league since 2005. He's played with a lot of teams, Rochester, Boston the past couple of years. He's got his leadership, his veteranship, which he will bring to the team. He'll help out Pierce Bassett coming in, and he'll give Adam Gittleman some views into, if there's something that he's not seeing right, or if there's something that he's not doing right. And I'll see. They'll expect a lot out of themselves.
Yeah, and I think that when looking at this season, I think some of the biggest things when I was looking at their special teams, sometimes that can be the deciding factor in some games. And just to give our fans a little knowledge here is that last year they were second to last in power play percentage at 25%, and they had a league low 40 attempts. They were also tied for worst on the penalty kill unit at 67%. As I mentioned previously, they were also third worst at faceoffs at 46%. They were fourth best in ground balls behind Hamilton, Boston, Denver, which is important because when you're a young guy and you're a young lacrosse player, every single coach tells you ground balls wins games. And obviously, if you can get the ball off the ground on a turnover, you start your offense or you start your break. But I think that looking ahead, they have to improve in those areas. I think they got lucky last year by Boston kind of taking a step back, New York and Rochester being really young, Ohio being a really bad team. It was kind of like they were the fourth best team in the league by default because we knew Chesapeake would be good because they had all this experience and they were the reigning MLL champions. Denver was going to be really good because they had so many weapons on offense. They had really good defense. They had Jesse Schwartzman, and they made the playoffs the year before. And then the Hamilton Nationals were really stacked. Joe Walters, Kevin Crowley, all these guys are good. And I think we'll talk about this next week in terms of our draft preview, but I think they need to bring in someone who can replace Pete Poyan on, I guess, the midfield unit to kind of stretch out the defense more. What was great about Poyan, as I'd mentioned when we watched him in the championship game, was that he stretched out the defense with a 2-point goal. Obviously, Mike Sawyer can do that, and he had the fastest shot in the game as recorded at the MLL All-Star game at 104 or 5 miles per hour, something ungodly like that.
114.
But, he needs to be replaced, that kind of ability to stretch the defense so that guys like Matt White and Ryan Young and Danowski can kind of do some roll dodges on the inside, give him space to go to 5-5, roll dodge, and get a quick inside roll for a goal. So I think that needs to be kept in mind, and I think it wouldn't hurt to maybe get a face-off man. I know Jeff Schneider's there, but how could you pass on a guy like Brendan Fowler if he's there? I mean, looking at some of the other teams, I think they're set at face-off for the most part, and they have other needs in other areas that I think that maybe they don't waste a first-round pick on Brendan Fowler, but to take him maybe in the second or third round would be a really good idea because he won, 70-something% of his face-off, or he won 60-something% of his face-offs last year. Kevin Massa was the other one, but he's only going to be a junior this year. I think they should really think about doing that, and also maybe getting another big gun to help them out with the power play since they were so bad at it last year.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, especially at the face-off position. Jeff Snyder, he plays NLL, and he really didn't come until the end of the season when Charlotte was making the playoff run. Brendan Fowler honestly would not be a bad pickup for them at all. They need a guy. They just need a guy to be consistent starting from the beginning. I mean, they have Jerry Raganese, who wasn't too bad. He's definitely been their guy for for the past couple of years, just until, Snyder or someone can pop in. Brett Schmidt, the defender, he can take some faceoffs. He went 2 for 2 last year, it was 2 for 2 last year during the regular season. Tim Fallon, he went 164 for 362. I wouldn't be surprised if they did go for Brendan Fowler, brought him in, and toughened him up in a sense. He's a stocky, pretty decently big kid out of Duke, who will definitely make an impact in the league, especially with Anthony Kelly and Greg Renly and getting up there in age per se. But the Beast and Anthony Kelly are just they're just two crazy guys that love just going at it like two Rams. So Fowler's definitely going to be in their sights.
Yeah, and I think even if they don't draft a face-off man, as we saw last year, they did a lot of double dragons, which for our listeners, if you don't know what that means you put 2 poles on the face-off. So you have your face-off man, which is a shorty for the most part. You can also put your long pole there, but not a lot of teams do that. They put their shorty on the face-off, and then they have 2 poles on the wings. Then you have 2 defenders down low, since you can only have a maximum of 4 long poles on the field. And then you have a short stick on the defensive end, so they'll probably put like Josh Hawkins down there or someone like that. And that kind of neutralized any threat that both Chesapeake and Denver both had last year in the face-off game, since we had mentioned that Charlotte was 3rd worst in face-offs last season. So I think it'll be a really exciting season for the Charlotte Hounds and their fans. I think they should be really excited about where they're headed. I think they're on the up and up, and they could finish, honestly, anywhere from 1st to 5th in this league based on all the other teams and their strengths.
Yeah, the playoff picture is very open, with Long Island making all those trades and the draft coming up. Anything's possible. And just to comment on your double dragon there, I remember when we were sitting there watching the game, how they had the 2 poles on the same side at one point during the game, and that blew my mind. But like you said, they definitely can finish. They can either help themselves a lot or hurt themselves completely. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year.
Right, exactly. So we're gonna hit a break, and then I hope you guys stay tuned because we're gonna do our New Year's resolutions for all 8 teams in the MLL. This is Andrew Goldberg and Brendan Stout on MLL Roundtable on Live 365 for Lacrosse Radio Network.
This is John Galloway of the Rochester Rattlers, and you're listening to Lacrosse Radio Network.
InLax Prospects is the elite website for coverage, ranking, scouting, and analysis of the top prospects in the game. With content written exclusively from professional coaches, scouts, and GMs, prospects.inlacrossewetrust.com is the place to be for the future of our game.
Hey, this is Scotty Comer from the Barry Blizzard, and you're listening to Over and Back on the Lacrosse Radio Network.
lacrosse was meant to be free for everyone. Every week, the Lacrosse Radio Network brings a free lacrosse game broadcast to you. Between Canadian box to professional field lacrosse, we are your home for free lacrosse content. The Lacrosse Radio Network. Lax on.
This is Patrick Crosby, goaltender for the Kentucky Stick Horses, and you're listening to the Lacrosse Radio Network.
Can be found here. Just want you to know we're updating our YouTube channel every night.
Welcome back, listeners, to MLL Roundtable. This is your host, Andrew Goldberg, with Brendan Stout. You can tweet at us, remember, at Goldieberg, at MLL Roundtable, and at BStout631. So if you missed the first half of the show, we previewed the Charlotte Hounds and looked back at their 2013 season. We looked at their offseason moves that they made for the 2014 season, as well as who they took in the supplemental draft, and maybe gave a little preview on what we thought they should do for the collegiate draft, which is coming up in 2 weeks down in Philadelphia. And then we looked ahead at what to expect from Charlotte with so many rookies heading into 2014. We really like what they're doing. So now we're getting in the holiday spirit, something I was really pumped up for, New Year's resolutions for every single team. Brendan, start us off.
All right, well, I'm going to start us off with the New York Lizards. They went crazy this year. well, this offseason, I should say, with with all their trades and everything, picking up Kyle Hartzell, which was probably one of the biggest blockbuster trades in the draft. Sending Matt Gibson out, Mark Matthews out, Grant Catalino back to Rochester. They made all types of moves that, just absolutely boggled my mind in ways that I was just like, oh, well, that's wow. My New Year's resolution for Long Island is get your head in the game. I really hope that they, really buckle down and focus this year. They have so much talent on that team. They just need to utilize everything with Tommy Palasek, Rob Pennell, Steve Mock, those guys on attack. You got Matt Strebel, Ned Crotty on the midfield. Just so much talent on this team. I mean, they even went and drafted the first female goalie to ever enter the MLL. So they're making moves that have absolutely helped them in more ways than one. I mean, with the possibility of Drew Adams going to Team USA, drafting a goalie was not a bad move by Coach Spallina. But for them, I just hope they really, buckle down and refocus where they want to go with this team this coming year.
Yeah, and of course you meant New York because they're no longer.
Sorry, it's blood. What can I say?
Yeah, we all make mistakes. Apparently, you caught me on calling the Charlotte Hounds the Charlotte Hornets last week, so forgive and forget, my friend.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I'm gonna stay in the area in New York and go with the Rochester Rattlers. Rochester, what the heck are you doing? Someone's gotta kick someone's butt in management, and my New Year's resolution for you is to get some freaking talent on your roster because you have nobody right now. I mean, granted, like I've said in previous shows and constantly throughout this show, it is a week. You're going to get talent because of the fact that there are so few teams in the league. There are 8 teams, so you're going to get really good talent. You're going to get All-Americans and the best players that ever go through X school or Y school and set X and Y records. But right now, your roster is pretty bare considering what you did in the offseason, what you look at compared to a Denver or a Chesapeake or even a Charlotte or Florida. I mean, you got nice pieces. You have John Galloway in goal. He's one of the better goalies in the MLL. You have a rising star in John Rannigan at the midfield position. The dude is a matchup nightmare for anybody in the midfield. He's big, he's tall, he's strong, he's fast. He's got an incredible outside shot. He can do whatever he wants out there. You got John Lade on defense, former Syracuse player. He was a first-team All-American for 3 years, and they won back-to-back national titles with him because of him and John Galloway. You got Steve DiNapoli in the midfield as a short-stick midi. Dan Groot, same thing. You have Dave Lawson from Duke, who is a good midfielder from Duke. He was very instrumental in their success there. But outside of that, you really have nobody else. You have no one on. You traded away Matt Strebel, and he was your biggest threat from the outside. So, please, Rochester, you got to have some type of plan. I want to give you talent, and hopefully you'll find it in the next year.
Alrighty, well, my next team is going to be the Ohio Machine. This team is young. They are ready to fire on all cylinders. They didn't have the best season last year. It wasn't, they're still finding their groove, being one of the other newest teams in the league. But they have a lot of young talent. Logan Schuss out of Ohio State, 35 points in his rookie season. Are you kidding me? He led the team as a rookie. Come on. And then you got Steele Stanwyck, who's I believe in his second year in the league. He had 32 points right after Logan. Unfortunately, got rid of Joe Cummings, which it's not a bad move, just to realign your team and whatnot. That makes room for Marcus Holman to come in, out of North Carolina. You got Kiel Matisse, who had 18 points last year at the midfield, and the midfield is where that team's really struggling. So I really want to give them some midfielders over there. They got rid of their LSM Kyle Hartzell, but they replace him with Brian Farrell, which was a very, very smart move by them. Unfortunately, trading Kyle Hartzell away, but bringing in Brian Farrell was probably the smarter choice Coach Bear Bryant has made. Chaz Woodson is now unfortunately down in Florida for the Machine, who he gave them a couple good years, but they did I think they re-picked up. No, they did not pick him up. Sorry about that. They got rid of him. I was talking about Billy Eisenreich, unfortunately. They made some moves. Connor English out of, I believe, Cornell. He's a great addition to the team. They're putting a team together that's going to make hopefully some type of impact. Making Billy McGlone number 1 overall in the supplemental draft was probably one of the smarter decisions to make. I mean, I talked with him prior to the draft, and he was on the phone with New York and Ohio, back and forth with them too. And, ultimately he ended up going to Ohio, and they add Stephen Pizer as well to the midfield. So adding Pizer and McGlone together at the midfield is absolutely amazing for that team. They are, adding midfielders, and I wouldn't be surprised come, draft day on January 10th if they added another midfield to the team. So, Ohio, take the midfielders. You need them. Take them.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for them. Obviously, they were 2-11 or 2-12 last year, and which was worse than the league, cemented themselves as the number 1 pick. But I'm gonna look. I guess we're looking at the worst teams and going back on up, because I'm gonna look at the Boston Cannons, who have had so much success in the MLL, up until last year, where they had a really disappointing season. I don't know if it was being old or not having a defense, but your New Year's resolution has to be get better on defense and get some young legs in there, because you did trade for Brody Merrill. Good job. You really needed him, and that's not a sarcastic good job. You actually made a good move. Brody Merrill is a Hall of Famer. He's a ground ball machine. He's one of the best defensemen to play the game. I don't know if he'll play. It didn't seem like he was too happy. A lot of the pundits didn't think that he would be too happy moving from playing in Florida to having to play in Boston, because I think he's coaching down there, I believe.
I think
if I'm wrong here, but
I think he might still be coaching up in Canada at the Hill School.
Okay, so even worse. He didn't even like to move down to Florida. So, I mean, who really knows what's going on there? But obviously, I think he's going to play for them, and obviously he upgrades their defense. But I think they still need more defensive help last year, because their problem last year was not on the offensive end. They had a good young player in Will Manny on the attack. He kind of took over as the quarterback of that offense. Paul Rabel is obviously the best midfielder in the game and a star for the MLL and the face of the MLL for the most part in terms of marketing purposes, because he's on the body issue for ESPN and usually in Under Armour commercials and everything like that. So they have talent there. They have a former MVP, Matt Pasquet, who's a crease monster. He'll finish anything on the crease in any way, one-handed, two-handed, between the legs, over his shoulder, whatever it is, you name it, he's going to finish it. Scott Ratliff, who they also drafted, who's young, one of the better defensemen to come out of the draft. He was great for them. He played a lot of minutes for them as well. They do have Kyle Sweeney, who's on the older, the older side of playing. And they did acquire Will Mangan, who is a solid player. When he got time for Denver, he did put up points, and he did put up points for the New York Lizards when he played as well. But they do need more help on the defensive end, really, with Sweeney and Ratliff and Brody Merrill. They do need at least one or two more pieces, and most of those guys are old. Matt Pasquet, I mean, look, he is not that old in terms of years. He's only like 29, 30 years old. But in MLL, he's been around a while. Ryan Boyle, kind of the same thing. Steven Berger, they acquired. He's going to be good for them, but he's a little on the older side. Same thing with Kevin Buchanan. So obviously, like, these guys are good, but they do need younger legs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, looking at their defense last year, their defense was basically all LSMs with Kyle Sweeney, Scott Ratliff, and Brian Farrell. Kyle Sweeney dropped down to close defense, just to give them an extra experienced guy down there. Adding Brody to the mix was definitely he may not be happy, but at the same time it was a great move by Boston. But he may also be happy just because it's closer and he won't have to travel as far from Florida up north to Canada. They definitely are going to need their team. Just something needs to click with that team. They have too much talent on offense, and their defense, like you said, they need to get defense, but they have too much the offensive talent for them not to make a run at the playoffs. If they don't, it's it might be just chemistry on the team. It could be coaching. It could be front office. Who knows? But they definitely need some defense, like you said.
Right, and it didn't help that Billy Day stepped down after I believe it was the first 5 games, and he had been the head coach there for a long time. Then their new coach comes in, they win 4 straight, and then they kind of just bottom out towards the end. And a lot of people really thought that Boston was going to hit their stride and make the playoffs, actually as that 4 seed instead of Charlotte. But, anyway, let's continue with the resolutions. We've only got about 8 minutes left, so let's just iron them out.
All right, I'm going to go with the newly formed / old Hamilton Nationals, the new Florida launch. This team, Canadian players on this team, Cody Jamieson, Kevin Crowley, Jeremy Thompson, Cody and Jamieson and Thompson are both Iroquois boys. Both Syracuse grads, a lot of Syracuse grads on this team. Casey Powell, in addition to that, they just added Chaz Woodson over the over the supplemental draft. Just added him. They have a lot of local guys on the team as well. Woodson and Powell are both down there. Lee Coppersmith, he's originally from Boca Raton, so I'm not surprised to see him down there. Unfortunately, getting rid of Brody Merrill wasn't, the smartest decision by them. But you got to do, you got to make the players in a sense happy, or you got to do what you got to do. Their team is not that it's not stacked all around. Their only problem is that they have a good amount of National Lacrosse League guys. Jamieson, Crowley, Keogh, all those, Powell, if Powell decides to go play. So they're going to need some offensive talent coming in again. One thing that I do want to point out is that Matt Lovejoy, who was a great defender at Virginia, will eventually be joining them. I think he has this year left, or was his last year at Virginia. I'm not too positive about that. I think it was last year. So he's definitely going to make an impact. He's definitely making an impact for them. I want to give them offense. They need offense. They need it. In net they got Adam Fullerton now. Picked him up, or got him from Denver. They have Dylan Ward and Brett Queener. 3 capable guys that are able to start in this league. Dylan Ward showed that he was able to play when he made those 21 saves. I forget against who, but he made those 21 saves and helped his team win. So they're definitely going to need offense heading into the season.
Yeah, especially since they have to replace Joe Walters. So I'm going to go with the team that really, I don't even know how to describe it, but it just was ugly what happened at championship weekend to the Denver Outlaws. I mean, they basically pulled a New England Patriots in the 2008 Super Bowl, but like 10 times worse, because they went undefeated, and then all of a sudden they just blew up in the playoffs like they did the year before. And it was kind of a trend with this team, and I think that was one of the biggest questions that we had going into championship weekend, is could they debunk the myth that they were kind of shell-shocked by going to championship weekend, and they would shrink from the biggest moments. So Denver, what I want to give you guys is kind of a mix of stability and maybe some luck, because you guys have had some bad luck. I remember last year Jesse Schwartzman was actually a little banged up. I don't know how much that played into him not performing well in the semifinal game, but we had heard that he had gotten hit in the shin by a shot. Obviously, goalies get hit in the shins all the times, but apparently, or in the calf, but the calf is actually worse than the shin because it really hampers your movement. Shin, you can kind of shake off, as you and I both know, but he got hit in the calf, and it seemed like the day before at practice when they were just shooting around and stuff, and it really seemed to hamper him during the game. So that's kind of a luck thing, and also in terms of stability, I mean, look, this team is really talented. It still is really talented. Yes, they lose when they traded who did they trade? They traded Mundorf to the Chesapeake Bayhawks. In return, they get John Grant Jr. But they still have Chris Bockley. They still have, obviously, they get John Grant Jr., who's older, but he's still one of the best attackmen in the league. He had 33 points last year. Zach Greer was unbelievable at Duke and is like a fifth option on this team. Anthony Kelly in the midfield at the faceoff is very good. Terry Kimmener gives them options at the midfield as well. Eric Law is a stud attackman. He had like 9 goals in the semifinal game against the Charlotte Hounds, and he was arguably the Rookie of the Year until the final 2 games of the season where he kind of petered out. Obviously on defense, they have a very talented defense. They have Michael Simon, who came over from Chesapeake in that trade. Obviously, they have Lee Zink, who was the Defender of the Year last year. So this team is talented, but they lost their head coach in Stagnita as he withdrew after the season, or resigned after the season, I should say. So they really need just some stability from the head coaching position and some luck as well. So let's go with our last teams here as we finish up. Brendan.
No. Well, I'm going to take up the Charlotte Hounds again. These guys, we talked about them and whatnot. I want to give them experience. They did gain experience from championship weekend. Don't get me wrong. I mean, those young guys, Poley, Hawkins, Sawyer, Lusby, all those guys finally got to experience a Major League Lacrosse championship game. The pressures of winning a national champion, or getting close to winning a national championship. I mean, these guys obviously can run with the best. They downed Denver, to give them their only loss of the season. They got the experience, but I want to give them more experience. They need the midfield experience. They need it there. Losing Poyon was a big, in a sense, a backbreaker, because he was definitely the leader at the midfield unit. But with Tripucka and Sawyer running midfield, it's definitely a plus for them. But they need experience at the midfield, and maybe get a face-off guy, give them a nice little, hopefully they get a face-off guy in this, in the draft coming up.
Right, and I want to go with the MLL champions as we wind down here. There's not much to improve on when you win back-to-back championships, and you add so many threats on offense. So what I want to give you guys on as a New Year's resolution is the fact that you guys need to learn how to share the ball, because you have so many threats on offense, and really all you guys need to do is not care who gets the stats and just feed the ball to anybody, and they will put the ball in the net. Your defense is going to be strong and experienced. Your goaltender is strong. Your offense is going to be incredibly good. I think they'll push Denver, who set the record last year for points scored or goals scored in a year. So that's my New Year's resolution. Brendan, we have to wrap up here. Another great edition of MLL Roundtable here with you. Have a great New Year's Day to you and your family.
Yes, back to you too, Andrew. Absolutely. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all our listeners out there as well.
Yes, exactly. So thank you guys for listening, and definitely stay tuned right now as Kyle Fletcher, actually, who we mentioned before, as well as Alex Uricourt, I can't really say his name. They are on the air right now doing NCAA Lax Game Day. Thank you, and have a good night, everybody.